or actually, perfect.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much, Peggy. My name is Mackenzie Mitchell for those that are listening in. As Peggy mentioned, I teach one of the courses for the Bachelor's of Sport and Recreation Business program. I am very excited to be hosting this group of speakers that we have here tonight. Very, very awesome and accomplished people. And I will let them introduce themselves. However, I'll do a quick overview that we have Mikaela Young, Elle Bardsley, Glen Graham, and David Bishko with us tonight. And we'll go ahead and jump right into this. Thanks everybody for being here. David, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a brief introduction of yourself, kind of where you come from, where you live now, what your background is in aviation, and kind of how long you've been doing it, that'd be great.
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you. Currently, I am University of Alaska's acting chief human resource officer. After I joined the university as a business strategist, and after I'm no longer the acting chief human resource officer, I'll be back to being a business analyst reporting to the president. Prior to joining the university, I was 25 years in the airline industry. Maybe if people can mute.
Yeah, 1 second here. Sorry. Yep, there we go. Good call. Thanks, Dave.
So I was 25 years in the airline industry, 18 years at Delta Airlines in various business positions, and then 6 years as an airline consultant, helping commercial strategies at various airlines. I came to Alaska to take a job at Raven Air Group, which some of you may remember. My timing was really, really tough, though, that when I took the job and left for Alaska, COVID was not a front paper story. I joined and we went out of business shortly thereafter. But that's what brought me to Alaska, and I loved Alaska and decided to stay.
Excellent. Thank you, David. Elle, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and give us a quick background on you and what your experience in the aviation industry is.
Yeah, okay. So hi, everyone. I'm Ellie. I'm currently working as a Beech 1900-135 first officer with Alaska Central Express in Anchorage. I did a whole, well, I lived my life in Florida, moved up to Alaska to start an aviation career because it was so big up here. My dad was a pilot, and 3 years ago I started this journey, and now I'm working for one of the best cargo companies in Alaska. And it's been pretty great, but had to do my time being a flight instructor for a while too, but a lot of education with that.
Excellent. Glen, you're on there.
Sorry, it took me a second to find the unmute button. Let's see, my name is Glen Graham. I've been in Alaska for about 30 years. Grew up in Alaska, kind of inspired by aviation. Here in Alaska, we have a lot of aviation going on. My dad was Air Force, so I got to see aviation from that side as well. My job now, I currently work for Everts Air Cargo, again, as a flight control supervisor. Some people call it aircraft dispatch or flight following. And how did I decide on a career in aviation? Again, I mean, I just, like growing up in Alaska, you see a lot of aircraft, you want to get involved, and it's been a fun process. So that's all I got for an introduction.
No, that's great. I appreciate it. And Mikaela, if you want to tell us about where you're from and kind of how you initially got involved in aviation and what you're doing now.
Right now, I'm an aerial firefighter. I just hired on at Dauntless there to fly a Fireboss. I was born and raised in Talkeetna, and I started with Talkeetna Build a Plane. It's just a maintenance program where a bunch of kids worked with mechanics, and got to rebuild a Cherokee 6 and decided to go to A&P school in Fairbanks out of high school. Got my license and worked as a mechanic in Fairbanks for Everts Air Cargo for 2 years. And then turning 21, I became a flight engineer on the DC-6, decided I liked flying better than wrenching, and got all my ratings starting in 2018. And worked as a first officer in the DC-6 and C-46, and then just now switched over to aerial firefighting.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Really, really great group of people on here. I kind of just want to dive into what aviation industries are all about, and especially because each one of you brings kind of a unique background and is involved in kind of a different career path within aviation. So the next question is, how did you get started in that career path and with aviation? I know you kind of have to bounce around a lot to get kind of where you're at, but explaining kind of that progression and how you kind of climb the ladder to get where you want to go, whether it's piloting or aircraft dispatch, or even with David Bishko's experience all the way in the international airline areas. David, if you want to start.
Sure. So I was in graduate school at Georgia Tech in Atlanta. I walked out of class one day and there was a paper on the wall that said that Delta was looking for an analyst in market analysis. And I've always been an airline nut, probably as all of the speakers are, and maybe probably a lot of you on the call also. It was always kind of a dream of mine to work for an airline. So I said, I'm in school now, but what the heck, let me talk to them and see what it's about. So right after graduation, that's where I went. I should say that before graduating, I did a number of class projects at Delta. There's a good relationship between Georgia Tech and Delta. So I did projects like throwing bags on planes and figuring out the most efficient way to do that, going to a city ticket office and figuring out how to best queue lines for people queuing up there, and various other type projects. My first job at Delta was in market analysis, where we determined the airline schedules, basically. Where do you fly, how often, what markets are going to be profitable, what not, how do you connect with the rest of the network? And then over 18 years, I did various different commercial jobs, from strategic planning to finance to sales development. And about a third of my time was in airline partnerships, when airlines partner with each other to offer the greater good to the customers. After I left Delta, I joined consulting and did the same type work, consulting for different airlines. My specialty was the airline partnerships and the network planning side of it. So again, what markets do you want to be in, both on a global sense, how big do you want to be in China, and also on a specific sense, how often do you want to fly to Oslo, Norway, that type thing. And then a lot with partnerships. Should you join an alliance? Should you have a joint venture with other airlines? I worked at airlines all over the world when I did this. So I've got quite a few miles under my belt. And to me, that's, it was a favorite part of the airline. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I had an opportunity to come to Raven Air Group as their chief commercial officer. Unfortunately, I was only there 2 days before we grounded the fleet and went out of business. They hired me back as a contractor, and I spent the next 4 months helping to sell the airline, which we were somewhat successful at. We sold half of it to Raven Alaska here in Atlanta, or here in Anchorage. That was the flying half. And then the Part 135 side, the other half, we basically liquidated and sold to the other airlines in Alaska.
And David, if you wouldn't mind just following up real quick, because I don't know how familiar with a lot of the listeners are with what Part 135 and Part 121, some of this language that we've been using. Maybe
I should defer that. I heard there's a Part 135 pilot in here. Is that Elle? Maybe probably a better question for her, I would say.
Yeah, let's do that. That's a great idea. Elle, if you wouldn't mind speaking to that, but also kind of answering that question of how you get to where you want to go and how you got to where you are now with aviation.
Yeah, so I guess I can kind of work those two together. So I got in aviation. My dad was a pilot. He was a helicopter pilot, completely different world from what I joined. But he moved up to Alaska and started doing both helicopters and fixed wings. So never thought that I could ever be as cool as my dad. Didn't think I could ever be a pilot. And he wanted to make sure that I had the determination to do it. So he set up a sim for me in my room and waited for a few weeks and had this picture up on how to fly a traffic pattern. One of the most simple things to do. So thought. In flying, and waited a few weeks, and then I finally asked him a question. I said, I can't get this one part down. And then he realized that I was actually working on it, and after that day, he really put in a lot of effort. So I was really fortunate to have somebody in aviation to kind of push me through. We started all my ratings up here in Alaska, just out of Birchwood, with a little 150, and got my private rating by June. And then June of 2020, the following year, I was a commercial CFI, CFII, multi-engine, and working for the same flight school that I joined with. Built about 900 hours of flight instruction with them during the middle of COVID. And then ACE, Alaska Central Express, hired me on, which I am now a 135 cargo pilot. So we fly all over the state of Alaska, flying about 5,000 pounds of cargo with a 2-engine plane, seats about 16 people in it. But the difference between a 135 and a 121 is pretty much just the operation that we won. So a 135 is going to be primarily doing cargo and small charters, and the caravans that fly all over the place that we know about. Those are mainly 135s. When you look at Alaska Airlines, they've got more people that they can haul, more weight that they can haul, and that's what classifies the two differences between them. One's charter, and then another one's going to be the commercial operation of it all that we know as mainstream aviation.
Excellent, thank you. Glen, did you want to go ahead and speak to kind of what the progression was to build up to where you're at now and what exactly it is that you do?
Sure, exactly. So my start was pretty unconventional. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up after high school. I graduated Eielson, and I thought that I was going to go to UAA and then go get a civil engineering degree. So I tried that. I got burnt out doing calculus, physics-based calculus, chemistry-based calculus, or calculus-based physics, calculus-based chemistry, all burnt me out all at the same time. So then I joined the Air Force. And then I joined the Air Force open. I didn't have a career field in mind. I just knew I needed to do something with my life. And then I got selected to become a airfield management. So, and luckily I got to go to a place where I helped set up an airfield for the F-35 program. And doing that kind of inspired me to continue my aviation career. And when I got out of the Air Force, I came back to Alaska, told myself I was going to go back to UAA and finish up, and I decided to go into the aviation program. I got my private pilot's license, and I realized that, hey, I got to find a good job, because paying for your private pilot's license and your commercial and your instrument, that costs a lot. So I was like, what am I going to do? And life took me back to Fairbanks and applied around for some jobs. Found out that Everts Air Cargo was hiring. I applied for dispatch initially, but I didn't have my dispatch certificate at the time, which is another FAA certificate that you can get. So I got hired into crew scheduling at Everts Air Cargo, and there was a lot going on. And that's where I got to meet Mikaela, being involved with crew scheduling. There's about 65 to 75 pilots over there, and working with their schedules and helping make the operation work with the pilot schedules was a pretty unique process. And that led me into the flight control process, where we do more than just crew scheduling. We do flight scheduling, flight planning, flight following, everything that entails the flight, from like where the pilots are going to be to meet the aircraft, where the aircrafts are going to meet us, where the cargo is that we need to go, anything like that. And then we'll plan that flight. We'll find out how much fuel we burn, check out the weather, how much weight can we take to a certain location based on the runway analysis. Maybe it's a 3,000 foot strip. Maybe it's a 6,000 foot strip. We could take more weight if it's a larger runway. And we do a lot of that to check out, to make sure that the operation is working out good. And we actually, like, I'll look on our screens too while I'm at work, and I'll see, hey, did ACE Air Cargo make it in there? Did ACE Air Cargo, did they put any PIREPs out there saying, or pilot reports, I should say, was there rough turbulence? Did they encounter that? Maybe our guys will. And then I'll brief our pilots on things like that. Anything involving a flight that you can think of or imagine, we've got our hands in. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Glenn. And Mikaela, if you just want to talk about, I know you have quite a different background from coming from mechanic to flight engineer to now being a Fireboss pilot, but if you could kind of talk about what those different jobs entailed for you, that'd be great.
So after, well, actually halfway through A&P school, I started working at Everts Air Cargo as a helper. And being a helper, you have to be observed by a licensed A&P. And so I did night shift as I went to school during the day. It was lots of pre-flights and stuff. And then getting out of school, I tested and got my airframe and power plant license so that I could legally sign off work on the aircraft. And I did that for a couple of years, doing heavy checks and line maintenance and learning the systems of the aircraft. And then you have to be 25 to be able to be a or 21 to be able to be a flight engineer. And it's another license with the FAA. It was a ground school and a check ride and a written with the FAA. And that's with the old aircraft, that the DC-6, it's all manual. You are the one maneuvering the throttles and mixtures and adjusting the temperatures and power settings and everything for the pilots flying. You're the third crew member in there. And then being in there, I got to watch all the pilots work every day and how the communications happen, the navigation, the weather, everything that entails flying an airplane. And I decided to try that. So in June of 2018, after a couple months of flying, I got my private, and just after work every day, I'd go fly, and was a commercial multi-engine pilot by March the next year, and then got hired on as a right seat in Part 125, a first officer, Part 125, flying fuel, because Everts Air Cargo sister companies with Everts Air Fuel, and we fly all kinds of fuel all over the state of Alaska, and it's a different certificate. So you get 250 hours as a pilot, you can start flying and making money commercially under this one certificate, Part 125, because it's different rules than 121, which is the cargo side. And did that for a year, and then got typed in the aircraft 121, which is, as Elle was saying, different rules for the bigger aircraft, a lot more restrictive. And then I got in the C-46 and flew fuel in that, and then got typed in it a year and a half ago. And to get a type, you have to have 1,500 hours, and I got my ATP. But I also need more PSE time to be able to upgrade to the left seat from the right seat to be captain. And so I started looking around and did some crop dusting here in Texas this last winter, and then got hooked up with, made a lot of contacts, and decided to fly the Fireboss because that would be a lot more PIC time and a lot of fun. It's a whole different world, and it's very interesting.
Awesome. Thank you very much. For those of you listening in, I'm sure it's a little overwhelming with all the acronyms and the 121s and the 125s and all of that. And really what that is speaking to is that within aviation, there's a lot of different paths that you can take. You can go into cargo, you can go into passenger transport, you can go to, Mikaela mentioned ATP, which is an airline transport pilot. And so there's just a lot of different opportunities within this field. So if you feel like you're getting left behind by all of the abbreviations and acronyms, that is the world of aviation. I think everybody can probably agree on that. I guess I'll just jump into our next question here, and that is kind of what skills improve your employability within the aviation industry and the career that you've chosen, and the importance of building industry relationships. David, if you want to start.
Sure. So I've always been on the business side of airlines. The engineers will frequently go into the technical operation side and various other paths. For me, I was studying industrial and systems engineering, which was a lot of statistics, operations research, There's a fair amount of financial analysis in there, engineering, economic type classes. It's fairly similar to the business classes that many of you are taking. And that gave me kind of the credit and the ability to do analytical type work, but I have to say that not a lot of it directly applied. I actually took a class called forecasting, and my first job at Delta Airlines was forecasting. The two were not related though, right? Forecasting at the airline industry was looking at airline data to figure out how many passengers or customers are going from point A to point B and what's the best way to get them there, taking into account the pricing in the market and the competition, et cetera. That was a good base for me to start my airline career because you're kind of touching all parts of the airline. If you're going to be planning the schedule, really all airlines rely on the schedule as the foundation of what airlines do, at least the scheduled airlines. So it gave me a good basis for the other parts of the airline that I did, such as going to finance, doing strategic planning, and partnerships. Networking was obviously very important. The jobs that I had, which was not just accidental, I didn't have any of the jobs that were kind of solo at your cube or at your office working on your own. Everything that I did touched everybody else. So my career path, some people would take the career path of one department starting off at the beginning level and working their way up to the top of the department if they're so inclined. My path was kind of going from one area to another, bouncing around. And I thought the broad experience was very helpful for me. And then working 18 years at Delta was a really good background for me to do consulting. My competition in consulting were the large consulting companies that you've heard of, which are very well respected. But I went to a boutique airline consulting company where we were very respected because everyone there, like me, actually worked at the airline. So when I was offering consulting advice to someone, they didn't roll their eyes like, well, what do these consultants know? Because I would tell stories like, well, this is the way that I did it. And it was kind of appreciated that way. One of my jobs at Delta, a main job that I had when I was at Delta, was partnering with other airlines. And I ended up working with about 30 different airlines across the world to set up airline partnerships. And so when I went to consulting, that was also very helpful because I already had a network of colleagues from airlines all over the world. And that helped me get into the consulting jobs at the other airlines as well as working with them. And then it was through connections that I was offered the job at Raven Air Group. The airline industry is huge, but at the end of the day, it is a network of people and the commonalities among them. You just get to know everybody.
Excellent, thank you. Elle, do you want to go ahead and speak to that?
Yeah, I think I really agree with the whole networking part of things. I think that, any career field that you can possibly go into, it's really valuable to have those networking skills. But to also kind of have a background in business helps a lot too, because you can know how everything works. As a pilot, we deal with being pretty much customer service, as well as having a whole lot of technical skills that we've had to build. As a pilot, we have to know the ins and outs of how the plane works. And we also have to do it in a way that kind of makes sense to everybody else around us. We deliver groceries to the villages in the middle of Alaska. So we're dealing right with the customer every single time that we're out there. And you build your network that way. And when I got my job with Alaska Central Express, it was me going in every week, 2 weeks, just trying to talk to the chief pilot and getting my name out there and saying, hey, I can work for you. We're gonna, I'll be a good member of the team. And the same thing happens everywhere. My dad just got a job because of networking as well. And it was just being in the right place at the right time and knowing the right people. So communications gets you a really long way in every industry, especially aviation, because it's such a small industry in itself. But definitely having the knowledge to back up what you're passionate about and having those skills built is really crucial in this field.
Excellent. Thank you. Glenn?
Yeah, I'll touch on that too. I mean, networking is huge as well. And also just if you set yourself for a goal and say you wanted an aviation career, you may have to take a lower job. Like I wanted to stay in aviation. So when I applied for Everts, I initially applied for dispatch, but I didn't get that, but they offered me crew scheduling. So I took that and then I worked myself up, got my certificate, my aircraft dispatch certificate, and that allowed me to be an aircraft dispatcher. Another thing that's big over at Everts Air Cargo is just to answer your question about skills that will help you succeed is multitasking. You really have to be big on multitasking, especially in the dispatch field, because you're watching multiple planes every day and you're trying to make sure that they're provided all the information to make that a safe flight. So multitasking is huge. I could be planning a flight, working the next flight, and I still have like probably anywhere from 5 to 10, maybe 15 aircraft that I'm following. And I have to make sure that the weather at the locations that they're going to, I have to make sure that none of that changed. And weather in Alaska changes pretty quick. So sometimes you'll see something where the weather is, it'll be reported as 10 and clear, and then all of a sudden you look at it and it's down to the visibility is down to a quarter mile, and you're like, well, we better call the pilots and and let them know that their destination has dropped below landing minimum, and they may not be able to get in. So I mean, you're always multitasking, and you're always you have to be able to start a task, be interrupted, and be able to complete those tasks, and continue to do so with little supervision. So those are some of the things that will definitely help you succeed, especially in the dispatch world. So. Excellent.
Thank you, Mikaela. Skills to improve your employability within the aviation industry and the importance of industry relationships or networking.
Definitely the like Ellie said, with the being in the right place at the right time is key. Being very open and communicating, being persistent is super necessary. That's the only way you get anywhere. Is you just have to be persistent. You got to remind them that you're there. You got to make the calls. You got to show up and just being in the right place when they need you. That's key, and never turning it down. Just always being able to what's the word? Make any situation work. Just basically just being able to figure out how to deal with the situation and get it done. And that's the only way to get anywhere, because it's never the same in aviation. It's always changing. There's always something new. You just always got to be able to cope with it and adjust to the situation, which is key. Thinking outside the box, being flexible, is very important. Otherwise you won't get very far. But yep, contacts, you just have to get out there and do it. There's no secret to it. You just got to go do it.
Excellent. So I'm looking at some of the questions that came in from students prior to hosting this event tonight. And I guess one of them is, are there any non-aviation specific majors that are relevant to a career in the aviation business? I know we kind of just touched on that, but kind of specifically if there was like a course that would really benefit you or did benefit you with what you're doing now, or an area that maybe you would go back and do a refresher course that would benefit you even more with what you're doing now. Just like David.
So, airlines are a business. So there's a lot of jobs where you could do the same function anywhere: finance, human resources, marketing, etc. So, the business courses that you're taking that would get you into those would help with those type courses at the airlines. Airlines also have very specific fields that are, unique to the airlines: pricing, revenue management, some other industries do it, but it's the biggest, it's a big thing in airlines. It started by airlines. Loyalty programs are everywhere, but it was started at the airline industry, and it's really big in the airline industry. The network planning that I spoke about, you know, and scheduling an airline, there's nothing like scheduling an airline anywhere else. So there's no, for those courses that I just, or those career paths that I just spoke about that are unique to the airlines, there's no specific coursework I could think of that would help you there. But just the ability to demonstrate that you have the basic skills, the basic analytical skills, the basic communication skills. You know, if you get through with, you know, doing well in your coursework, and it's especially important today, far more than when I first joined, some kind of internship or some kind of project work, you know, those are both key to get you in the door.
Excellent. And Elle, is there a specific course you'd go back to school for that would benefit you more, or a specific course that really lent itself to what you're doing now?
I can't think of anything specifically, but I definitely think, you know, a business major, and to kind of take a different spin on it. My husband and I, we've got this dream of having the Alaskan life, the beaver on floats, hunting, fishing, flying people out into the remote wilderness. But we have to have a 135 certificate for that. So it's going back to the regulations and running our own business out of a little house with a couple of small planes. It's not as big as being a part of an airline, but it still requires a lot of knowledge into how to run an operation. How can we charge people? How can we make sure that the customer service is going to bring people back? How do we make sure that we're complying to business regulations? And a lot of it is just knowing how not to get yourself in trouble, and just knowing what the laws are behind it, and having that business degree would really help. And my husband's even gone back to school to get a business major as well, just so we can start this 135 backwoods hunting expedition.
Awesome, thank you. Glenn, same question.
All right, sure. I think David summed it up probably the best, because aviation is a business. So, I mean, we may not be producing a product, but the delivery of product, and I'm speaking from Everts Air Cargo, where we deliver a lot of cargo. Our product that we produce is the flight to deliver that product out to the villages. It's not, we're not producing like, you know, something to manufacture, but it is a business. Aviation is a business. So our goal is to get the delivery of that product out there safely, timely, and economically. So all of that entails, I mean, if you have a business major, I mean, you're going to be successful. And it is very translatable. At least that's the way that I look at it.
Mikaela, do you want to go ahead and speak to that question?
I think the only thing for me currently right now that in my current job would be, I wish I had gone and done an aerobatic course. Flying these Firebosses low to the ground, heavy, slow, and some of the turns and maneuvers you have to do to get on drops and stuff. I think I really could have benefited from doing an aerobatics course, and I will do it, but leading up to this point, it would have been very beneficial to learn more of the aerodynamics and the feel of the aircraft and how all that goes together than, you know, from more than you would get from your standard training of private and commercial and maneuver.
Excellent. And just if you wouldn't mind just kind of explaining and talking about what a Fireboss pilot is, because I know this is kind of a unique field. There's not many Fireboss pilots, and maybe you can speak to kind of what that is and what you guys do on a day-to-day and what you do when it's not fire season.
Well, when it's not fire season, everybody's got their own side gigs, and a lot of it is fertilizing trees and whatever little business they run out of their home, or just taking a vacation from fire season. But so Fireboss pilot, they're actually kind of a up and coming thing. It's fairly new into the industry, but it's a single engine air tanker, so it's an air tractor, an 802 air tractor on amphibious floats, and we normally travel as a flight of 2 or 3 or 4, and we fight fires. We scoop water at near the fire, and we drop it on the flames to help reduce the flames. And then there's other tankers that come in and they drop retardant, which is just stops the spread of the fire. But we do the direct attack to initially knock down the flames on the fire. But it's holds about 600 gallons, give or take, how much wing gas you got on for your gross weight. And day to day, there's contracts that you get put on for the season, or you're on a call when needed contract, and they'll call you up when they got a big fire and they need support. And 1, 2, 3, 4, I mean, up to 6 of us at a time has been known to go out, and you'll get sent to a base, and you get your orders where to go, and you talk to an air attack, and they put you on the fire. But it's a very it's difficult. It's a lot of information coming at you all at once when you're new, but it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on the new gig. And
Thanks.
if I think I'm correct, you're down in Texas right now, preparing and training to get ready for fire season, correct?
Yep, it's company training right now. Everybody that hasn't flown in the last, well, since about September, October, since the end of fire season last year, they are all knocking the rust off, and we're all doing simulations with air attack airplanes talking to us, and we're scooping and dropping on targets that get described to us, and everybody's getting back into the groove.
Excellent, thanks. And we'll move on to the next question. If someone wanted to right now pursue the career that you have in aviation, what would be their first step? Or how do you get involved in aviation? What's step 1? And we'll start with you, David.
Well, if it's a kind of a business type job that I had, if you're in school now, the next step would be an internship of some sort. That's a really good way to get in, not just the airline that you're interned at, but any other airline as well. Most of the major airlines in the country and in the lower 48 do offer internship type programs. If it's an airline here in Alaska, I think it's there's traditional channels to get in, but I think networking is even more important here in Alaska, just kind of meeting the people. And I find here that everyone, if you don't know each other, you know of each other, and that's a good way in the door. For me, I went in kind of the old school way of found an advertisement, and it's not, we didn't have online back then, right? I found a piece of paper on a wall and called the number. So that's how I got the door, and then met the people. The other thing I did before, I actually didn't do an internship myself, but as I mentioned in my classes, I had, I think, 4 or 5 class projects at the airline. So when I first met with the people in the first interviews, I was able to sound, and actually legitimately sound, somewhat experienced, because I had done an entire coursework working side by side with other employees. So that's very helpful too. If you're in classes that have projects, choose and you're interested in airlines, then choose a project in the airline industry. And that's just a great conversation piece.
Excellent. And Elle?
It's pretty self-explanatory with a pilot, but you have to have a pilot's license. And I spent a full year training people how to get their pilot's licenses, and it can take as short or as long as you want it to, but the main things that you follow is your hour requirements. You got to have a certain amount of hours. In order to have a commercial license, you got to have 250 hours. In order to fly for an operator, most people require you to have an instrument rating, which means that you can fly into the clouds and know what all of your instruments are telling you, and making sure that you can get back safe and get the persons on board, or the property on board, to its destination safely. And comes with a lot of knowledge about the area and knowing how to dead reckon, how to find out where you are in space and where you are in Alaska, which can be very confusing with these valleys. And you just go through a lot of training about how to know the aircraft and how to do that. So that's really the first step in getting to the point that I'm at now, is just putting in that time, putting in that effort, because you have to do it one way or another.
And Elle, if I could kind of ask a little bit of a follow-up, because, to become a pilot, I know you got to start at your private pilot's license, and then you move up into your instrument commercial, and then a flight instructor, CFI, and then a CFII, flight instructor for instrument, and then a commercial rating, and then maybe a multi-engine rating, and then an ATP, which is an airline transport pilot, to be able to fly for like bigger airlines. But if you could just talk about the cost of that, and I think Glen mentioned earlier that how expensive that is, but how you go about affording that, or what options are out there to help fund that.
Yeah, so I've actually got a bit of a different scenario, because I was really fortunate. We actually bought our own plane, and it was $20,000 to buy a 150. At that time, the market's definitely gone up. And it was about $20 an hour to build the time. And I was lucky to have an instructor as my dad. But then he went off to jet school, so I had to find another instructor and another flight school. But if you go the traditional route of getting a private license is 40 hours. It costs you between $8,000 and $12,000. Then you go on to your instrument rating, where you're going to need another 40 hours. And then that's going to be cross country time and possibly having a more advanced aircraft. So that's another 12 to 14. And then your commercial, it's building the rest of that 250 hours that you need. So it varies from person to person. It's very unlikely that you'll get each of those licenses done right on that hour mark, because most people will do it in about 65 hours for a private license, add another 50 on top for your instrument, maybe 60. And then you've got all your check rides and fees along with that. So it is fairly expensive, but you really work it off pretty quickly. And then if you get your CFI, that you get paid to build your time. So when you get your airline transport license, you need 1,500 hours, but you've paid to build 250, let's say 270 hours of that. Then you go on to a business that pays you to fly. And then you're building the time and you're building your money at the same time. And it's basically a 2-for-1 deal. But it's, if you buy your own plane, I mean, we made a lot of our money back because we sold the plane at the end of it. And it made for a really cost-effective way of flight training. And there's a lot of instructors out there that you can find that, even with some flight schools, like the flight school I worked for, we would instruct in people's personal planes. Maintenance is a little bit different, but you really get to kind of know what you're getting yourself into when you can really upkeep your own plane.
Excellent. And Glen?
Yeah, I mean, to get to where I am, I mean, I got my private pilot's license. I wanted to be a pilot, but I couldn't afford it. So I just got my foot in the door in aviation and worked my way up. Getting your dispatch certificate was only about $6,000. And so I went and got my dispatch certificate here in Fairbanks at ProFlight and got picked up as a dispatcher. So, I mean, I think if you really wanted to be in aviation, I think you really need the drive to be in aviation. I mean, you can do a lot of the same jobs in a different career field, but if you want to be in aviation, you really have to have the inspiration to be in aviation. I mean, like Ellie said, I mean, the costs alone are enough to turn people away. But if you work hard at what you want to do and work hard at aviation, I mean, you will be successful. So.
And I just wanted to add scholarships. Scholarships are huge in aviation. There's so many out there. There's even Alaska did a grant program, and I had quite a few of my students, apply for it, and they got between $8,000 to $15,000 towards their, and it's not a small chunk of money, but if you put in the effort, Alaska Airmen's Association has it, University of Fairbanks has it, UAA has them, and there's a lot out there, so there is funding available, and not a lot of people take advantage of it, so you can do that too.
Excellent. Thanks for adding that in there. And Mikaela, what would be the first step to starting the career path in aviation to maybe become a Fireboss pilot or flight engineer or flight mechanic for that matter?
Well, for the mechanics, I did a lot of scholarships and just signed up for the AMP course, which I think was really valuable for me because you learn every aspect of all the different size aircraft between general aircraft and commercial aircraft and large jets and everything else, all the paperwork that's included with it versus working for your license, because you can work for your AMP, your airframe and power plant license. You can work 18 months and test for your general and either your airframe or your power plant, whatever field you're working in, and then work another 18 months and test for your second license, which can save you a lot of money because you're making money the whole time as a helper, so not as much as you would as a licensed mechanic, but you're also not paying for school, which works if you're going to stick with that company or in that exact field. But I think the AMP program was really valuable to teach you every aspect of it and give you all the sides of it and paperwork and rules, which is a huge part of it. As far as flying on the aircraft, being a pilot, what really helped me was being a mechanic at the company already and doing that for a couple of years and talking to people and telling people I want to be a pilot. And I went to Pro Flight and I got the Jepson's course and signed up online to do the ground school and took my written to show people that I wanted to be a pilot. I was serious about it. I got that done, which is a huge step for a lot of people. And was able to use one of the aircrafts that the owner of the company I worked for just had sitting around, a 182, and I paid for fuel. And I talked to another coworker of mine, and he's a CFI, and he started training me, and I was able to get all my license and everything said and done debt free because you just put in effort. You got to be there, you got to show up, and you got to want it.
Yeah, no, I'm happy you mentioned that because the aviation community is kind of small and tight knit, and I think that that's a good point. That when you express an interest in doing it, there's a lot of people that love aviation also, and kind of are always kind of willing to help out and kind of want to be there for each other and give each other, opportunities to fly and get into the industry. It's definitely one of those fields for sure. We'll move on to the next question, and that's kind of like a day in the life. What's the best part and the worst part of the job? David.
Well, I'm no longer in the airlines, but I'll reflect back to that. To be honest, I was at business job, so I was in meetings and working on spreadsheets and presenting and everything, which could sound boring to a lot of you, but if you love the industry, even doing spreadsheet work to figure out, oh my gosh, we need to fly to Rio de Janeiro instead of to Sao Paulo, that's really exciting. How many passengers are we going to get? That's pretty exciting. Setting up deals among airlines to kind of convince each other why you'd be good partners and how you should split your profits among you. From if you like the business, then even those desk jobs are very, very exciting. For me, the best part of the job, although I found that really interesting, was being able to fly for free. So I for 18 years in the industry, I flew for free, and I really took advantage of it, just going all over the world. I guess the worst part of the job was that the airline industry is not so stable. So when I was at Delta, we went through a Chapter 11 bankruptcy. At one point, we thought the airline was going to shut down. I came to Raven Air Group. We did shut down. So there is part of that. There's always the fear that your airline might not make it, because it's a very competitive industry, and there's just various challenges that it does have. You keep your skills up, you keep your network up, and if it doesn't work out at one airline, then you're able to go to another.
Excellent. And Elle?
So being in a different kind of field here as a 135 operator, there's a lot of upsides of it. We get to have a ton of fun all the time. I'm currently running on, woke up at 11 p.m. last night to leave my house at midnight to get to my 1 a.m. shift to go fly a twin turboprop down to Juneau. Didn't make it into Juneau, so we went over to Sitka. We dropped all of our packages off in Sitka, went down to Ketchikan, loaded more packages up in Ketchikan, then went over to Wrangell and dropped everything off and came back to Anchorage, and it was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And it's amazing being a 135 because it's a little more connected than being in a 121, because you get to see the actual effects of what you're doing in the industry, especially being in remote Alaska. Alaska Airlines couldn't deliver the packages in December to Yakutat because there was a regulation that prevented them because of the weather from going in there. So what did we do? We delivered their Christmas presents. And it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing because the two that are always there, always cheerful, this husband and wife, they collect all of our packages, and they said, you guys are the reason that we're having Christmas this year because you were able to get this job done. And it's amazing having that small town kind of connection, being in a smaller operator. But it is difficult waking up at 11 p.m. to get to a 1 a.m. show and be in a cold plane and being in King Salmon in negative 26 degrees and it's blowing wind and snow drifts all over the place. And you come back in and all of the hair on your face is white, just covered in ice. So those are the difficult parts, but there's nothing about it that doesn't make it all worth it.
Awesome. Glen, what about from your side of things, on the dispatch side of things?
Sure. So, I mean, aviation in Alaska, I mean, it has its ups and downs. One of the good parts about it is like, sometimes I don't know what to expect from work. I don't know where are our challenges for the day going to be. And then some of the better parts are like working through those challenges and accomplishing those flights. I mean, just like Elle said, I mean, delivering packages to the villages when the weather is low, and a lot of people may not be able to get in, but we plan everything as best as we can. We work with our pilots to make sure that the flight is conducted safely, and then they get in, they deliver the packages, and then, I mean, you really feel like you're contributing to sustaining life out in the western side of Alaska, or all over Alaska, off the road system. So, I mean, there are definitely some rewarding days, but there are definitely some days where you do all those steps to try to make everything happen, and then the weather drops, and then you can't get in. You watch a flight go in to land at a location, and the pilots can't get in, and then they go and they turn back around and they try to get back in again, and they can't. I mean, you're dealing with a lot of different obstacles, the weather, the runway conditions. I mean, maybe the aircraft breaks like halfway there and they have to turn back around, and there's a lot of different challenges. But when you make a flight happen and everything happens safely, and the pilots are home safely, and the aircraft's all working still, and the people out in the villages, they get their groceries, and I mean, that's when it's really rewarding. So,
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mikaela, best and worst part of it from your side of things.
Best part, current job I have, nothing's ever the same. It's always different. We're always in a new place, or the weather's different, or the view's different, the situation's different. It never gets boring. This well, I mean, it's a new job to me, but I can tell you from the veterans in the job has said that every aspect of it, it's always, it's busy, it's challenging, and that's my favorite part, is that it's always something new. You don't get bored with it. And I think that's the best part, because like wrenching and everything else, I'd just get bored after a while. I just became the same thing every day. And I like seeing new things, new places, experiencing. That's probably my favorite part about aviation in general, and then now this job. And then the worst part is, well, with aerial firefighting, they leave home for the summer. You're gone for 6 months at least on end normally. And but it's, some people really like that part of it. Some people, that's part of the reason why they do this job, is because they get out and you've got your family on the road. You connect with the people you're scheduled with, and they become your family on the road. But so I mean, yeah, it's the worst side for some people, but on the other aspect of it, it's just another cool part of the job personally.
Excellent. Well, we are wrapping up here in the next few minutes, but I would like to just invite each one of our speakers to just kind of share what they may think would be something important to our listeners. Each one of our listeners chimed in today, likely because they had some sort of interest in aviation, whether that was informative or maybe getting involved in a career path. So just kind of final notes of anything, really. David, if you want to go ahead.
Sure. So I've had a number of students over the world, actually, that have found me on LinkedIn. And nothing special about me. I have a lot of friends that they've done also, that have pinged me to say, hey, I've seen what you've done. I'm particularly interested in this. Do you mind just kind of talking to me about a future in the industry? And as a result, there's probably a dozen students right now that I haven't met them in person, but I've had phone calls with them, Zoom calls with them. And part of it is they're looking for career advice, but part of it is that networking. And that is kind of the game to play. Now, again, if you're here in Alaska, you might have closer connections, or somebody that knows somebody. But if you're looking outside Alaska, that would be a pretty good step for you to take, is just kind of reach out to someone and see if you can connect. Most of them probably won't accept your LinkedIn request, won't want to talk, but someone will, and that's always a really good start. And if you're someone like me that loves talking about airlines, you'll find someone like that, and they enjoy having those conversations.
Excellent. Thank you. Elle?
Yeah, so there's something I was told when I first started, and it was that you're basically selling yourself all the time. When you're in this industry, everyone that you meet, everyone that you're flying with, or just meeting on the street, if you're out there and you show up and you show that you're a hard worker, people are going to want to help you, especially in this industry. I had a 150 over at Birchwood, and when it was heavily snowing, what was I doing? I was making sure my tail wasn't going to smack into the ground with the weight of the snow. Brushing everything off. I was plowing out my own spot because it was on gravel and we couldn't get any equipment there. And there were people like the owner of the hangar that was right there that would come out and help me. My plane died one time, and I was gutted, and because I left the master on. And he came out and said, "What's the problem?" And I said, "Well, my plane won't start." And I was, "All right, let me grab my gloves. I'll hand prop you." And it's just, people will go out of the way if you can sell that you are worth it. And it goes for everything. If you're a flight instructor and you show that you have this true passion, people are going to want to learn from you. If you are flying with a captain and they go, this person has really shown up and they know what they're talking about, and they don't need to. When that person moves on, it's still a small community. If they go to Alaska Airlines or anything like that, they might be your reference. So every person you meet, you need to make sure that you make a good impression, and just really have a passion for what you do, know it well, and stay humble.
Excellent. And it is 5 o'clock right now, but I would like to invite Glen and Mikaela just kind of to share their final notes as well.
Sure thing. Yeah, I guess, yeah, the biggest thing is probably just the drive and the want to be in aviation. I mean, networking and everything, I mean, those are important as well. And showing that you have a strong commitment to work, that's really good too. And just getting your foot in the door. I mean, like, you may not get the top tier job at an aviation job, but I mean, maybe you'll get offered something lower, and you keep at it, keep working towards your goals and moving on up in the company. And as long as you stay at it and you stay motivated and inspired by aviation, then you'll continue to do good and continue to reach your goals. And I mean, a lot of people don't know about dispatch, but we've had several people from our company too. I mean, they've gone on to either they moved on to aviation, like becoming a pilot, or like maybe we brought them in from a different company. Like some guys like myself, like started off in crew scheduling, and we just hired another guy in our office that came from load planning. And I mean, I didn't even know what was dispatch was until I started working at Everts Air Cargo. But I got my foot in the door. I contributed to working at Everts and working my way into the dispatch office. So, I mean, who knows what it takes me next? Maybe I'll be a pilot like Mikaela and Elle. So we'll see. But you got to stay motivated, and you got to want it.
Excellent. Thank you. Mikaela, some final thoughts to share?
Honestly, Glen and Elle wrapped up everything I was thinking. That's the gist of it.
Okay, excellent. Well, I can't thank the speakers that we had on here tonight. Such an excellent panel. And also thank you to the listeners for the questions that you provided and for sticking with us tonight. And what a great event. So thank you all, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks.